Hi, everybody. Welcome to tonight's conversation with esteemed epidemiologist Glenn Grossman. Thrilled to be here with you for our regular members of our audience and for those who are joining us after this recording on April 4th via YouTube. Thank you for logging in. Happy Passover, happy Easter, happy everything to those who are celebrating. Hope everybody is doing well and had a good week since we were last together. I am Rebecca Berman, thrilled to be moderating tonight's conversation. If you have any questions, please send them to me via the chat at the bottom of your screen. And thank you to everybody who has sent in questions during the week. We have a robust conversation as always, thanks to you. And we really, really appreciate that. Glenn has been busy preparing answers to lots of your questions, not just about how the virus impacts humans, but we'll be talking more about our pets, as we did last week. Okay, Glenn Grossman is an esteemed epidemiologist with over 20 years of experience. While pursuing his doctorate in epidemiology at UNC Chapel Hill, Glenn served as an epidemiologist on staff at the UNC Infectious Disease Clinic for 2 years and taught epidemiology and advanced analytics at Duke Medical School and at UNC. He has been involved in epidemiology forecasting and advanced analytics with Bristol Myers Squibb, Sanofi, Novartis, Medicare, Medicaid, Veterans Health Administration, the Military Health Service, CDC, and other programs within the United States and abroad. All views expressed today are his own. So Glenn, as always, please take us around the country and take us around the world. How are things looking?
Thanks, Rebecca. Great to see you. Great to see everyone. Thanks for the intro. All right, let me share my screen. All right. All right, so let's see where we want to start here. Oops. All right, why don't we start in the United States looking at, looking at, this is where I want it to be. All right, so here's the United States. You can see that there are a bunch of states here that are in the red, that were really either not going in the right direction, or in addition to not going in the right direction, the numbers are getting high. There's one more that I want to show here that I didn't bring up, and that is over here. This is Dibak. All right. So before I go on here, so you can see that there's a few areas, basically 3 or 4 areas that I'm really thinking of. One is the New York City metro area that's now spread to all these surrounding states up through Boston, and so it's really hit this one area. The other one is in Florida, and then also Michigan has been growing rapidly, and then over here Minnesota newly is turned red. When you look over here, I like this website because it shows each separately. So New Jersey, you can see I've been talking about this for a while. In New Jersey, the trend line looks very similar to New York City. The New York City data is a little bit noisy, so it's a little hard to see. But you can see when in much of the country, we've been talking about the numbers going down and what we've been hearing, you can see that in the states that we're looking at, the numbers are actually going up. I mean, and they've been going up for weeks here, but they're going up. They're terrible numbers at terrible heights right now, but they're continuing to go up. So I mean, what we're looking at are numbers that we haven't seen since Thanksgiving. I guess it came down, but it's numbers that we haven't seen for a while now. We're talking back in January or so here in terms of when we last saw numbers this high in New Jersey, and we're still going higher. So we're about now where we were back in Thanksgiving in terms of the slope. You can see that it's not rising anywhere near as fast as we were back then. A few reasons for that. One is the vaccination rate. 2 is the seasonality of it, that we're really in a different, when you think of normal flu and cold season, we're really on approaching the tail end of that right now. So it's just making it more, just the climate itself is making it more hard for the virus to spread. And then also after I guess the experience we had with the peak over the winter. I think that there's still a fair amount of mask wearing and stuff going on. That's sort of reducing the speed at which we're getting worse. And so that's why you can see it was really steep back shortly before Thanksgiving. But we're definitely not out of the woods here. And so you can see here's New Jersey, Michigan. When we click on that, here, well, first New York. New York's easier to pull out. Or actually, let me use this. So when we look at New York, so you can see the New York data is so dirty right now just because the New York City data was noisy. And so it's hard to see what's exactly going on, but it probably looks very similar to what's going on in New Jersey because otherwise it's hard to explain what was going on with these weird numbers. But it looks probably very similar to New Jersey. Michigan that we talked about, you can see, look at this, the shape of that line, that's just going up. That's largely the UK variant that's driving it. And I expect it's largely these other variants of concern and variants of interest in New Jersey and the New York City metro area. But in Michigan in particular, this is almost all the UK variant that's driving it. And Florida that we just talked about, whoops. So that those numbers are, we're going down. You see that they're going up now. They're not going up as fast as these other states are, but Florida right now, the weather's great. It's not like it's right in New Jersey. It's been back still in the 20s a couple times over the last few days at night. Whereas in Florida, they're not worried about freezing cold weather, and so the numbers should be much lower there now. The Florida should have numbers approaching 0 at this time of year. It's not too humid right now generally, and it's the weather's great. But so the fact that Florida is going up under these conditions is what's worrying and disconcerting. All right. All right. So we've talked about this. Let me go back. Let me start looking at global, and then we can come back into the variants. Oh, before I go, yeah, let me talk about global first. Oh, before I go, this I want to look at the US website here. So this is consistent with what we were just seeing in terms of where the cases are all occurring. Now, just because the cases are occurring there doesn't mean that's where the deaths are occurring. The deaths are actually occurring in other states, and that's because the ages and the risk profile of the people that are spreading it are a little bit younger in age and healthier. And so as a result, we're not seeing the same level of deaths. With the exception of New Jersey, the death rate is pretty high. But you can see that in the surrounding areas, it's not quite as bad as the cases would have made us think. So here's the cases, and here's the deaths. So you can see that they're a little bit different. Also, so here's what the view looks like at a national level. So you can see that the United States as a whole was going down. Now we're starting to tick back up. And remember, the US it distorts the view a little bit because it's an average among all the states. But when I just showed you the states, you can see that there's very, very different rates that we're seeing across the states. So each state needs to be looked at separately. So talking about the United States as a whole sort of hides all this variation that we're seeing across the states. The other thing, so here's, so I showed you, oh no, I haven't showed you deaths on this graph yet. So interestingly, because of the vaccines, largely is the large reason here, even though the cases are starting to go back up, the deaths are not going up. So the deaths were flattening, and rather the cases were flattening and then starting to go back up. But in contrast, the deaths are continuing to go down. So this is really good news. It's the data is a little bit dirty in the most recent week, so it's we're going to need to wait a week or two to ensure that the trend is still there. But I'll come back to this in a second in terms of the vaccinations. But basically, the key insight here is this thing right here, the vaccination rate. So currently, 40% of people over the age of 18 in the United States have had at least one of their vaccine doses. And 23% of people over the age of 18 are fully vaccinated. But even more amazing is that among people over the age of 65, 75% have had at least one vaccine dose, and 55% are fully vaccinated. So over half are fully vaccinated. And the reason this is important is that over 80% of the deaths occurred in people over the age of 65. So the fact that now 75% have gotten at least partial vaccination means that the death rate is going to drop dramatically now going forward, or we'd expect it to drop dramatically. We still need to get the numbers up higher. We're also worried about vaccine hesitancy. We've been talking about that previously. And the fact that 75% have already gotten at least their first dose among people over the age of 65 is really good news. Because even if there's some vaccine hesitancy, it means that there's still a lot of people getting vaccinated, but it means that we're likely to get much higher than this still among the people over the age of 65. So this is really good news. We may have been too pessimistic in the vaccine hesitancy among this population. The vaccine hesitancy among people under the age of 65 is still going to be an important thing to worry about. But so I just talked about vaccine hesitancy. I can jump to a poll on this that was really interesting. All right, so this is the corona vaccine. So roughly on average, around 70% of people say that and this is from multiple sources I've seen. A Facebook poll said this as well. Around 70% of all adults are planning to get a vaccine, the COVID vaccine. When you look at it by by race, the racial gap is narrowing, and so that they're all getting higher. And that was the major thing I wanted to show there. Globally, so when we look here, let me jump into the global vaccine question. So globally, how does this all compare? Let me go down here to first dose. Down here, there's so much information we don't need. All right, what share of the population has received at least one dose of the COVID-19 vaccine? Israel, 60%. They've been there for a while. So you can see that they really did a really big effort to get a lot of the population, and they really accelerated very fast, but now they've kind of stalled out. And so over the last, so what is this? This is going back to March. Over the last month, they really haven't made very much progress at all. They stalled out at around 60% of the total population. In comparison, that compares to the percent of our total population. Currently, it's 18.5% are fully vaccinated, and 32% of the total population have gotten at least one dose. You see here that the more, in some ways, a more important metric is the population over 65. It would be interesting to also see the vaccination rates broken out by the high risk groups. I think I saw that in other places here, but for now, let's just focus on this. Within the global, they're using the denominator of all people. So it's not just people over 18 or anything, it's all people. And so when you look at that, you can still see where we are. So the UK is doing the best after Israel. They're at 46%. Chile is doing amazingly well at 36%. The United States is at, I think the data here is delayed a little bit in our world data. What I just showed you in the US CDC, I think is more accurate. We're roughly at the same pace as Bahrain. Other countries in Europe are also doing somewhat well getting the first dose out, but a lot of countries in Europe are trailing. Hungary is doing well. Serbia, 21%, Finland, 17%, Estonia is at 16%, but then it starts dropping off. So France is at 13%, Italy 12, Germany 12, Morocco, Turkey 12, 11. Brazil, which has been hit among the hardest in the world, is only at 7.7%. They are not taking this seriously enough. And Russia, India, Indonesia, you can see those are now bringing it up. When you look at the global map in terms of first doses, you can see that there are a lot of gaps. Some countries have done virtually no vaccines at all. Other countries that have been hard hit, South Africa has not been vaccinating very much. And so you see that we're really, when it comes to looking at variants globally, we really need to be doing a better job of doing the global vaccination. It's not only helpful for them, but it's going to help us to ensure that our vaccines continue to keep us safe. Because if new variants emerge, they could break through our vaccine shields, and that would be problematic. When we look at the second dose, so second dose is down here, how many have been fully vaccinated? And some of the doses, like the AstraZeneca vaccine, was a 2-dose regimen, but it's largely been given out for just the first dose that we were seeing in Europe. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine is a 1-dose regimen, And so that's someone who gets Johnson & Johnson with 1 dose has been fully vaccinated. So here, when we look at the percent vaccinated, you can see that Israel has around 55%, and the United States is at roughly 18%. Chile is a little bit ahead, but Europe has really been focusing, or much of Europe has been focusing on getting as many people a single shot as possible, rather than rolling out the 2-dose regimen. And AstraZeneca, that was a collaboration with Oxford University in UK, did the extra clinical research to demonstrate the sufficient efficacy of the first dose that justifies. So instead, they still plan to give the second dose, but instead of doing it within 3 or 4 weeks, now they're pushing it out to 6 weeks or more in terms of what they're intending to do. But you see that the numbers are a lot smaller. All right, let me just show, I'm not going to show this one. All right, let me go to this. So when we look at the world, a bunch of countries are still not doing well. You can see that they're in the red. Europe in particular is doing poorly, but I'll just scroll through some that caught my attention. So Argentina, for instance, Southern Hemisphere, is starting to go up again. You can see that they were really struggling. They were doing this time, when you look at where we are now versus this time last year, we're ending cold and flu season, or on the tail end of cold and flu season in the Northern Hemisphere. But that means that the Southern Hemisphere is now about to begin cold and flu season, which means that so when you're looking at June, July of last year, when they were beginning the cold and flu season, that really helped to potentiate COVID-19. That was really where Argentina started to lose control, and where it just got really bad for many months. Now you can see that Argentina is going back up again. This is largely the Brazil variant, I believe, that's spreading. I don't know for sure, but I would be very, I'm very confident that this is the Brazil variant, because when you look at Brazil and how poorly Brazil is doing, you can see that the infection rates are enormous there. There's a lot of people getting reinfected. Herd immunity doesn't seem to exist there, because the new variant has broken through the immunoprotection from a lot of people who are previously infected. And so the numbers in Brazil are insane. And so that's bleeding over into the surrounding countries. And so that's why we're seeing numbers still high in other Southern Hemisphere countries as well, or one of the reasons. So I'll continue scrolling, you'll see that there's quite a lot of countries that are not doing very well. When we look at so when some smaller countries where there's not a lot of data, or where the countries might be the population might be smaller, you see more noise than others that sort of average out. Estonia was doing pretty poorly. Now they're starting to come down some. Finland, you can see that a lot of countries in Europe were doing poorly. There have been some more shutdowns, some more lockdowns. So now the numbers, like France, Germany, I think that they're starting to come to a peak again, and are going to start to drop more. Greece is still going up. Hungary, you can see that they're maybe starting to go down a little bit, but still quite high. So I guess the big story here is that even though the United States numbers are coming down generally outside of the states we discussed, globally, there's still a major pandemic going on right now. The world is burning. A lot of countries are in really bad shape. And so the fact that a lot of countries are not vaccinating as much as we should be is really problematic, because that means that this pandemic is going to persist for longer than we would like globally. But then the other major thing for us is that because there's so much of the pandemic still burning globally, then that means that it's an opportunity every day for new variants to emerge. And so that's going to be problematic. And so that's the big story globally. In terms of variants, let me come back into that for a second.
Before you move on to variants, could you show us the map of Israel back on this page? No, back on where you are now. How is Israel trending? I'm just curious to see what their curve looks like.
Yeah.
Like,
Whoops, where did it
with
go?
the knowledge,
Their
with the
curve is much
information
better.
you just gave us.
This is a better one. So here's Israel. You can see that they're approaching 0, which is amazing. This is cases, of cases. So their spread is going down dramatically, which is amazing. But even better than that is death rate. And so here's confirmed deaths. Israel. So I guess not as good as I would have liked to see, because the problem is that there's a gap, a delay between when someone gets infected, when they're hospitalized, and when they die. So the death rate here is really representing maybe people who were infected maybe a month ago. And so as a result, the great work that we're seeing because of all the vaccines is not as reflected. It's a little bit reflected in the death rate, but I think that's why it's not down closer to zero yet. But the fact that their case rate has dropped so much is just I think that's what largely a lot of us believe that the United States is going to look very similar to that if we continue getting a lot of people vaccinated. So Joe Biden is still pushing to get the entire adult population in the United States vaccinated within 2 months. So by the end of May. And that's really ambitious. We've talked about vaccine hesitancy, and that's going to be problematic. But I think that when you look at the people who have already been prioritized, say, people over the age of 65, and that over 75% have already been vaccinated, I think we're in really good shape. We're going in a great direction. Oh, there's one other thing I wanted to show here at the vaccine rate, and that is the number of vaccine doses given per day. And where is that here? Not per 100. I want total. I think it's not relative to population and vaccinations. And so far in the United States, there have been over 160 million doses administered. But even more interesting is in the United States, we've hit over 3 million on average, over 3 million doses administered per day, which is great. I mean, so if we had hit that number at the beginning, I mean, obviously there's always a ramp up curve. So that's what you'd expect here. But 3 million a day, when you're talking about hitting 300 million, that would only take 100 days if it was flat, if there was not a ramp up curve, just a flat number. And we're still increasing. I think over the past week, even I read that there was one day where we hit over 4 million vaccine administrations on a single day. That's just incredible. So we're continuing to speed that up. There was an issue with the Johnson & Johnson manufacturing plant that we can talk about a little bit later. I don't think it's going to slow it down, but it might prevent us from increasing how fast we administer doses over the next couple of weeks. All right.
Glenn,
great.
before you move on to variants, Harry, if you could, I'm going to ask you to unmute. Let's see here. Harry has a question about Israel.
Harry?
Okay, so the question is the 60%, that's being vaccinated in Israel. That's an interesting number because it's remained constant. And so it would seem to reflect that there's a fair number of people that do not want to be vaccinated in Israel. Yet you've also presented the information that the deaths are dramatically lower and the infection rates are low. So what does that 60% really mean?
So this is 60% of the entire population, including kids. The percentage of people vaccinated over the age of 65 in Israel is much higher. I don't remember what the numbers are, but it's much, much higher. And so as a result, because the vaccines do amazingly well at preventing hospitalization and death, that's why the cases are coming down so fast in terms of that we're seeing. We're one of the reasons. But this other question about spread, how well do the vaccines prevent spread? A lot of the spread is still taking place among 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds and teenagers. And so that's part of the reason why we still see some spread there. my point of view is, but the people who are, say, teenagers are much, much, much less likely to have severe disease. They're more likely to be asymptomatic or simply to have a minor cold. So at that point, if they get a vaccine or don't get a vaccine, the major worry I would have would be if there's variants that emerge. But even then, it's not as much of an issue, because once the highest risk people get mostly vaccinated, then those people will have very, very little risk of having severe disease. So that means that it's not going to be an epidemic that we need to worry about. Even if the vaccination rates don't get high, and even if the virus continues to spread, if there's no severe disease among people who are at high risk, then our concern is going to diminish. The question is how will the public policy shift over time? And I don't know what that's going to look like yet. Based on the state's behavior, where a lot of states are really eager to eliminate the mask mandates and open up the businesses, I'm guessing that by summer, I think that even if we're seeing cases, that they're spread, but that the hospitalization rates, that's the most important metric, and the death rates are going down and approaching zero, then we'll get to some sort of new normal where businesses will open back up again, the offices will open up, all the schools will be back in person, people will take off their masks. I don't know exactly when that will be. The other thing we can talk about in a little while, or I can talk about it now, as long as we're talking about vaccines, is Pfizer just released its latest clinical trial on kids under the age of 16. I think so. They released it on kids age 12 to 16. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick. Yeah, so there was they've been doing additional clinical trials on kids. And so the first one that they've just reported on this past week is kids age 12 to 15, and it demonstrated 100% efficacy in these kids, which means that right now they're applying for an emergency use authorization for this expanded population. Previously, it was for people over age 16. Now it's going to be presumably, if they get the emergency use authorization, kids 12 to 15 will also be able to do it. And so that will be great, because now that there's so much more vaccine becoming available, where they're hitting 3 million, 4 million vaccine administrations each day, then this is really great news. And that means that even the kids will be able to, kids over the age of 12 should be able to get vaccinated within 2 to 3 months, I would think. And so we'll see. In addition, they're also continuing clinical trials in kids as young as, 6 months. So kids age 6 months or older. And so they're continuing to do these clinical trials. So I fully expect that, but we don't know yet. I mean, obviously that's why you do these clinical trials. But I'm confident that we'll have the age group, that kids get approval as well. One of the big reasons that we've delayed doing the clinical trials in kids is because first, always what you want to do is clinical trials in the highest risk people. Then when you prove safety or demonstrate safety and efficacy in the highest risk people, then you can expand the population to people where maybe the risk benefit wouldn't have been the same under the same conditions. So under 12 to 15-year-olds, because the severity of the disease tends to be much less of an impact for kids age 12 to 15. If you're weighing the balance of the safety and the efficacy, you really, really have to have a very, very, very safe drug and a very efficacious drug to demonstrate that on balance, the risk is worth it, because this disease itself isn't so bad in that age population. And as you get even younger, it's even more so, where the risk of the disease is so low that in order to get approval, you really have a high threshold of safety and efficacy. And we've met that high threshold in older people. So we're confident that we'll hit it in the kids as well, but we still have yet to prove it. That's what the clinical trials are for. All right. I was talking about variants.
Yes, you were moving on to variants when I cut you off with the question about Israel, but that was good, because that's where we were.
Great.
in the international landscape. So now bring us back to the variants, please.
So yeah, so the UK variants have really made their home in the United States. And it's interesting. I should have put a slide together on this. So it's interesting. I've mentioned this earlier, but we didn't have much data, and that is the UK variant. One of the reasons that it's called the reason it's called the UK variant was because it was identified in the UK. But one of the reasons that it was identified in the UK was that UK has been doing genetic sequencing at a much higher rate than we have in the United States and in other countries. And so as a result, let me see if I can find this. Oh, here. So this is one of them. I want this one. Nope. All right, that's not one. Anyway, let me go back to what I was showing you. So so because the UK has been doing a lot of genetic sequencing, they've been doing a lot of screening of the variants, they were very likely to find it. But now we're realizing it may be the case that the UK variant actually came from the United States. And so we just had no idea it was even here, but the variant might have just started here because it was just going out of control here for so long, in the United States for so long. And then someone from the United States visited the UK and then infected someone in the UK, and that's how UK found it. But really, it seems now that there was UK variant, or what we're calling UK variant, so the B117 variant might have been circulating in the United States all the way back in September or October. Almost certainly October, but likely September. And that is disconcerting for us. The fact that it's so, I mean, we still call it the UK variant, but there's a possibility it did not occur it did not start in the UK, that it could have started in the United States, for instance, or another country. Anyway, but here's the UK variant. Again, what's unique about this of B117 is that there's three things that we're looking at here. One is that the UK variant is around 50% more contagious. Two is that the UK variant is also more deadly among people who do get it. And three is that luckily it's fully protected by the vaccine is fully effective against it. So anyone who's vaccinated has the same protection of against the UK variant as the regular variant before the other variants emerged. So the regular COVID-19 that it was originally tested against last year. So this is good news for people who have been vaccinated, but for people who have not been vaccinated, this is where it's occurring, and this is why we're seeing these specific states that are starting to get increases in the rates, because the UK variant is really starting to take off now in some of these places. And so when we were looking at here, Florida, it's starting to go back up. We were looking at Michigan, New Jersey, New York, the Northeast. That's why we're looking at that's what we're looking at here. It's these states where the UK variant is so common. The B1351 is what we call the South Africa variant. And you can see that's pretty widespread in the United States, but it's not spreading nearly as fast. You can see they both hit at roughly the same time. They were both found, but you can see that, but since we've been tracking this for the last few months, the UK variant is now in the tens of thousands. It's 12,500 that have been screened. And again, this is just the tip of the iceberg, because a lot of people would have had it, but we're just not doing a ton of screening in the United States. And then that compares to only 323 of the South Africa variant, or 224 of the Brazil variant that have been found. So clearly the UK variant is tremendously more contagious. When you do look at the Brazil variant, you can see that the spread around the United States they're occurring in many different states than the other ones that we're talking about. So that's interesting as well. The South Africa variant, there's a lot of, so that's this one, B1351, a lot of interest that's been expressed on that because it's demonstrated that it's not as effective in some of the vaccines. In fact, I have a great slide that I put together. This comes from the, here, let me just find it real quick. Where?
Glenn, while you're looking for that slide, maybe you can tell us approximately what percentage of tests undergo genetic sequencing in the United States.
Oh, that's a really good question. I forget what the total is right now, but it comes from this website at the CDC. So we were testing, is it this one? Let's see where we
I
are.
think at one point it was like 5%.
No,
Does
we
that
have
sound
not.
about right?
I think that that's higher than we've hit so far. But let me see where
So
that
these
was.
numbers are derived from a percentage that's likely in the single digits.
Yes. So let me see if I can find it. This is data and surveillance. It's variants, genomic surveillance. I think is it on this one? Nope. Just give me 1 second. All right, so this is the classification. Is this how much screening we're doing? Nope. Oh, shoot. There's one.
You can report back to us next time, but I think it was in we'll go with single digits, under 5%, something like that, right?
Yeah, I think it was. It was under. Oh, shoot. They've changed the links a little bit on this and over the last week, and so things where I knew exactly where they were, I no longer can see exactly where they are. All right, I'll get back to you next week. I
Yeah,
apologize.
no, that's that's okay. We can't expect you to know all those statistics off the top of your head, but I guess what I was just trying to remind our audience about was the fact that still so few of the tests are being tested. The genetic sequencing is being tested.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's just a tiny percentage. It does vary dramatically by state. Um, is this? Oh yeah, this is what I want to show. So yeah, it does vary dramatically by state. And so we can. Well, I might have a slide from previous weeks. No, I'll come back to it. I'll come back to it next week. All right. So this is a question that comes up a lot. I like this table that the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation put together. So far in the United States, the 3 vaccines that have been approved are Johnson and Johnson, Moderna, and Pfizer. Globally, there have been a bunch of vaccines that are in use now, and so they put together this great chart comparing their estimate of efficacy, but based on the different variants. So if you recall, the 3 variants we were just talking about were B117 was the UK variant, B1351 is the South Africa variant, and P1 is the Brazil variant. So when you look at Johnson and Johnson at the UK variant, that's around 72%, a little bit less than Moderna, but not super less when you're looking at the population. At Moderna, what came in at around 94%, and Pfizer at around 95% effective, which is the same ballpark. They're all roughly the same ballpark. Johnson Johnson's a little bit less for B117, and so they're looking at for most of these, they're looking at a booster shot in the fall. And we've been talking about a booster shot in the fall for a while now. So I mean, this is probably just likely what we'll see. And so that's for the UK variant. You see that it's roughly the difference here that we're looking at is efficacy at preventing disease versus efficacy at preventing infection. So the disease is what we care about. If they have asymptomatic infection, what's important there is that it's still worrisome because then it could spread to people who don't have the vaccine. And so that's why we're still worried about the infection rate. But the disease among people who get vaccinated is also more interesting. But you can see that they tend to be similarly effective at preventing disease and preventing infection, although not as quite as high. So you can see that preventing infection, Moderna was 85%, Pfizer 86% in this, whereas Johnson & Johnson was 72%. Efficacy at preventing disease for South Africa and Brazil, J&J was around 64% effective at preventing disease. Moderna and Pfizer are 72% at preventing disease. Now, disease here is not hospitalization. Disease is I think they might have included moderate and severe disease, or it might have been restricted to severe disease. But the key thing is we're not looking about hospitalization or death. The numbers are much, much higher at preventing hospitalization and death. So even here, if someone does get disease from one of these variants, they're still likely to be heavily protected, more so than what we're seeing here from the hospitalization or death. Also, when we're looking at infection, you can see that that 56%, 62%, 63%, all in the same ballpark. There's one other slide here I can bring up, where this is where it is. All right, so let me make this a bit bigger. All right, so what we're looking at here are a comparison. The woman who's been doing this is she has a website that's called Your Local Epidemiologist, and she's been putting these updating this great table, reviewing all the currently approved vaccines, and then the ones that are on the radar that are likely to be the next ones evaluated for approval. And it's not technically approval. I use the term approval. Really, it's emergency use authorization. They're continuing to follow the participants of the clinical trials, and then once they've been followed for long enough, then they'll presumably get formal approval. But right now, technically, it's under all of the vaccines are under the emergency use authorization regulatory pathway right now. But interestingly, what this question about efficacy is right now, we've been talking about this looking at antibodies. So the numbers I just showed you, which were what I just showed you down here, which was right here. These numbers are largely looking at antibodies. And one thing that we've talked about for a while is that the immune system doesn't just use antibodies. It also uses T cells. I mean, it uses other things also, but in terms of responding, in terms of adapting to an infection for prevention of future infections, it's not just antibodies that we're talking about. And here, this table is largely antibodies in terms of the numbers that are reported here. But one of the really great insights that we found is that even though the antibody levels might be dropping for some of the variants, what we're finding is that the T cells are actually taking up the slack, and that we're seeing the T cells here that are actually making it more, it continues to be effective against some of these variants more than you would have predicted based on the antibodies alone, because the T cells are so effective at helping. So this is really great news. So currently the vaccines are still highly effective against all of the known variants, even the ones we've been talking about, UK, South Africa, and Brazil. So this is really great news. But we're continuing to evaluate this. I'll let you know if we have more information that arises. Other than that, I think that's it on the variants for now. We've talked a lot about this. Let's get to questions. We're running out of time.
This is great. Thank you, Glenn. So we have a question from Rachel. Rachel, if you could unmute regarding variants.
Hi, everyone. Question on the variants and the testing. Do other countries use the variant testing as part of their standard testing process, or like I just find it so, I know in the US you said it's very low, but in other countries that are finding all these variants, is it just standard in their reporting?
Yeah, so there was a slide back, I think, from November. Let me get it real quickly because it was a really good snapshot. So just give me 10
So this
seconds.
is my favorite part of these conversations, Glenn, when we ask you these questions and if folks can see here, Glenn is looking through well over 1,000 slides that he has put together for these conversations to go back, and somehow he will remember where the answer to this question is.
It's all visual. I remember what the slide looks like, and so then I just am trying to see if I can find it. I might have scrolled through already.
Okay. So we'll cut you some slack because as we see, you are looking through well over 1,000 slides.
In fact, I can remember it was a Washington Post article that had done the analysis, and it was so great. Oh, it's a shame I can't find it. Let me just scroll a little bit longer. When did Ruth Bader Ginsburg die?
Can you do a Control F?
Yeah, I can do that. I was hoping it would just emerge on its own magically.
Okay. Do a find if you want.
All right, all right, let me do that then. All right, here's find. All right, let's look at variant. And it's 137. Oh, let me go back over here because this is, I remember the cluster of slides that it was in. And so that'll help me find it a little bit quicker.
So if you're looking, Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away on September 18th.
All right, so it's after that. All right, it was a cluster of, whoops. Oh no, this was after. Just a minute. All right, so there's one slide that looks like this, and it was this slide. It was right around that slide. So let me see.
All right, so everybody keep your
I
eyes
used-
open
I used
and
this
make
slide
a
a few
signal when
times,
you
though.
see it.
It's like a game called Stump the Professor. Isn't
Here
that
it
something
is.
you
There it is.
play?
See, it was right. I was right around this cluster of slides that I originally got. So here, I like this because it shows how much genetic screening they were doing. This was, I think, back in November. Oh no, this was December 23rd is when they did it. So basically, as of December 23rd, Australia was sequencing 58% of every case. New Zealand was at roughly 50%. Like they were doing the most. Then Taiwan, UK, which was doing a lot. So Britain was doing a lot. They were screening 7.4%, and that was a lot. We were at 0.3% as of the end of December. So this was hardly any at all. In contrast, in the United States now, that was one of the priorities from the Biden administration. As soon as he came in, the Biden administration, let me see if I click on this. It's so disappointing that they rearranged their website without, oh, here, so this is what I wanted to show. So this is the one. When you look at the rate that was giving us 0. So this is December 26th, we're at 0.3%. The sequences per week, as soon as, so we were getting a little bit higher during the transition, but still not very high. But then January 20th, as soon as Biden came in, they immediately started throwing a ton of money into increasing sequencing. It took a little bit of a delay to actually start seeing the impact. But by February, we're starting to see massive increases in sequencing of the variants. So I don't think we're quite at 5%. This, if I scroll down, so here's states. So this is the key one. Okay, so here's the key one. It doesn't say the United States as a whole here. I think maybe it did at the top of the website, but you can see that there's variation. In Maine, they're at 4% of all, so among all the cases, 4% are sequenced. Wyoming is at 6%, and Washington State is at 3%. These are the state leaders. In contrast, you can see some of these down here. Mississippi is only at 0.17%. So less than 1 out of 100, far less than 1 out of 100. And so you can see a bunch of states in the South. They're just not prioritizing this. New Jersey right now is at 0.37%. So we're really nowhere near where we need to be. And so essentially 1 out of one screening, or so if you find a variant that they've screened, it represents maybe a little bit less than 1 out of every 300 people. So if you find one variant, you can assume that one case that they found of that UK variant, for instance, will represent between 200 and 300 other people who actually have it and just weren't screened for it. And so we're really not doing enough screening here yet. But you can see that some states are doing much better. The key thing here that we need to look at is where we were versus where we are. This is just a different. Does it say up here what the percentages? No. But basically, you can see that we're getting better. Some weeks are better than others in terms of how much we're doing. But the key thing is the CDC recognizes it, and the Biden administration recognizes it as a priority, and so they've put a lot more money into it. And so as a result, the percentages are going up, I think. But it's still not as much as we'd like it to be. All right, Rebecca, some more questions?
Okay, terrific. So last week we spoke a little bit about pets, and if you could just, we had another question about how serious is COVID-19 in cats and dogs, and can they spread it? Do we have any updates since last week when you started to tell us about this?
Yeah, so there's been some more work looking at cats and dogs now globally that's been reported. And so there is a worry. So both cats and dogs can be infected with COVID. The UK variant seems to be even more so in terms, because we know it's more contagious in people. It doesn't necessarily mean it's more contagious in cats and dogs, but they have found it. That UK study I described last week, where they found it in the cats and the dogs, demonstrated that some of the dogs and cats were having significant illness as a result. Anyway, I'm going to come back down here. But so basically, there's a couple new studies because of this. The one thing that we found recently is that is that here they did some studies on like purposely infecting cats and dogs, and they wanted to answer two questions. One, could the cats and dogs infect other cats and dogs? And two, could the cats and dogs infect people? And so first, they infected cats here. And what they found is that when they experimentally infected the cats were able to transmit it to other cats in the same household. And so that's worrisome, because then if we know some cats are outdoor cats and some cats are indoor cats. If people have outdoor cats and the cats go outside and are interacting with the other cats, then potentially they could be catching COVID from another household and then bringing it home and bringing it into someone's house who has not had COVID yet. And so that is the second question. Can the cats and the dogs transmit it to people? Currently, there is no scientific study that's been able to demonstrate that that is possible. The problem is it would be very, very hard to create a study like methodologically that would be able to determine that or to answer that question. Because the reason is that people tend to be around their pets. So for instance, if you are a dog owner and you take your dog outside to a dog park, if you're asking the question, did the dog get it at the dog park and then infect the parent? Well, guess what? The parent could have caught it at the dog park too. So being able to separate it out to find examples of situations where we know the person could not have been exposed to the other owner of the other pet and was only exposed to their own pet, then that's where they got infected. That is very, very hard methodologically to figure that out, to surgically figure out that one question. So I don't know that we ever will. It's possible that there will be evidence that arises that we'll be able to see one way or the other. And we could perhaps look at it clinically in tissue or other ways, but really the epidemiologic question would be extremely difficult to evaluate. However, what they have, so the fact that it can spread between cats and dogs is something that's interesting. All right, in addition to that, what they found is there was one study looking at stray cats and stray dogs. And although they didn't find active infection in any of the cats or dogs in the study that was published, this was in Brazil where there's that we've been talking about, huge epidemic going on. What they did find was there were antibodies in the cats and dogs, or a few of the cats and dogs in this small study of the stray cats and dogs, and in Brazil. And so what this means is that presumably they were getting it. The fact that there was not widespread antibodies means that presumably it was not an epidemic among the stray cats and dogs, which is good, because it could have been the case where they were spreading it a lot, and that would have been bad. In Brazil, there are 78 million. It's estimated that there are 78 million stray dogs and cats. Oh no, this is as pets, not strays. Sorry, these are pets. So that would have been a lot of strays. 78 million dogs and cats as pets in Brazil. So it's a major issue in Brazil. In the United States, we have quite a lot of pets here as well. So a lot of us have been tracking these studies. In addition, in Arizona, they're now recruiting cats and dogs for a study on COVID. And right now, there's no evidence to suggest, like I just said, that pets can transmit the virus to humans. It's still scientifically plausible that it could occur. So far in the United States, more than 120 pets have tested positive for COVID-19 nationwide. But we're not doing widespread screening of pets in the United States. When a family might come down with COVID and get tested, it's not standard operating procedure for you to then take your dog to the vet to have your dog tested as well. So we don't know how widespread it is yet. But yeah, this is something that's ongoing. It can be serious. We saw evidence of heart involvement and other things with cats and dogs with COVID. So yeah, it's definitely something we're paying attention to.
So I see that that pet is giving a blood sample in that picture. Will you be reporting in future conversations about perhaps testing that's underway for vaccines for cats and dogs, where that picture might show a pet being vaccinated?
That's a really interesting question. I'm not aware of any currently. There might be some that are ongoing. I'll definitely keep an eye out for it. So if I find any information about this, I'll let you know. There are different burdens of proof required for vaccines in pets like dogs and cats versus people. And so, for instance, Lyme's disease, there's vaccines that you can get for various diseases for pets that are not available for people, even though it's the same type of virus or bacteria that you might be trying to vaccinate against. But all right.
All right. Well, we'll stay tuned. And all you pets out there who are listening to this conversation, and I have mine right here next to me, we will look forward to getting more information on that front. Okay. So we are at the top of the hour. I can't believe our conversation really flew by tonight.
Did
We have so many questions yet to be answered. I think what we'll do is we'll wrap up with one more.
how about a couple more? Just we'll go through them kind of quickly.
Okay.
A couple more.
So shall we talk about you touched upon it earlier, the manufacturing issue with the J&J vaccine?
Sure.
Okay.
All right. So yeah. So basically, Johnson & Johnson subcontracted with a company called Emergent Biosolutions, and they made a mistake. It was human error. They were, in addition to manufacturing Johnson & Johnson's vaccine, they were also hired to manufacture AstraZeneca's vaccine. Even though the AZ vaccine wasn't approved yet, AZ is still working to manufacture a lot of doses in the anticipation that they will be approved, and then they can get them on the market quickly. But so the problem was Emergent Biosolutions accidentally mixed the Johnson & Johnson and the AstraZeneca stuff together. And so as a result, they ruined 15 million vaccine doses, which is a lot. It's really bad. Currently, this was in a Baltimore plant. Currently, we're not getting our vaccines for the Johnson & Johnson vaccines from the Baltimore plant yet. It hadn't yet been approved by the FDA to manufacture. It was although it was manufacturing it, the drug wasn't approved for release from the plant. It would have to have additional inspections and whatnot. And so luckily the system worked. We caught it and realized that there was this problem. Currently, we're getting our doses. Our Johnson & Johnson doses are actually all coming from Netherlands, which is interesting. So let's see the other two things. So the question is, how does this impact our national vaccination program? So the federal officials said they still expect to have enough doses between the 3 vaccines that have already been approved to fully vaccinate every adult by the end of May. So we're still on target. These would have been sort of extra doses. So it really doesn't impact things a whole lot. It would have been nicer if we had more, but it's not a crisis that we don't. And then the other thing is Pfizer has stepped up and is now shipping doses ahead of schedule. Moderna is on the verge of winning approval to deliver more vials more doses per vial. And so as a result, that should speed up delivery. And so we're still on target, even with this, that by the end of May, if we ignore vaccine hesitancy, we're on target for the rate of vaccination to really be getting vaccines into every arm who wants it, certainly by the end of May. Among adults, kids will take a little bit longer as those vaccine clinical trials roll out. All right, Rebecca, let's do 1 or 2 more here.
How do you like that we're getting our J&J vaccines from the Netherlands? But I guess we're all interconnected in this, and we're sending many of our doses from the United States overseas. So very interesting. Okay.
Yep.
So let's wrap up with the question about surgery and other medical procedures. Should those procedures be delayed after a COVID infection or after one receives the vaccine?
That is a really good question. And where did it go? All right, here, it's a little hard to see. So basically, this was a really interesting study that was just released a month, or I guess early March, so around a month ago. So what they identified is that there's persistent, lingering consequences to people who are infected with COVID-19. And so the first thing I want to mention here is that this is people who are infected with COVID-19, not people who are vaccinated with COVID-19. People who are vaccinated with COVID-19 should think of it as with any vaccination. So if they were vaccinated with flu or vaccinated with anything else they might be, that it's an immune system thing, but it's just a vaccine issue. It's not an infection. In contrast, with SARS-CoV-2, with the infection with COVID-19, we know that it infects the heart, it infects the digestive system, it infects the kidneys, it infects all sorts of other organs in the body. And as a result, those organs need to heal, and it takes time. And so what this study did was it looked at, this is the key thing to look at here, what I'm moving here. I can't make it any bigger than that. They looked at the mortality rates following surgery. And so first I'll show, this is the first one up here is, oh, I didn't capture the whole picture, but basically let me look at this one. This is a little bit better. All right, so basically if you look down here, 0%, 5%, 10%, you can see that when you compare zero, no, actually this is not what I want to do. Let me look at this one first. So this is pre, this dot up here is pre. You can see that there's a higher mortality rate as soon as someone's infected up to 2 weeks, from 3 to 4 weeks, from 5 to 6 weeks. It's a higher mortality rate among people who have surgery. And then once you go more than 7 weeks, the mortality rate goes back down to what it was before COVID. And so that means that they're suggesting that people should wait at least 7 weeks prior or post-infection to get surgery. Then the question this one was answering is, well, how does this differ if it was asymptomatic versus symptomatic that resolved versus ongoing symptoms? And this is a key insight. If it's asymptomatic, you can see that even though there was a signal that there was slightly more risk for death during the surgery or following the surgery between 0 to 6 weeks. And so even among asymptomatic people, they're still recommending wait 7 weeks or more. For people with resolved symptoms, it's more pronounced, but you can see that there's a distinct drop off. And so 7 weeks is still the magic number. One thing that's interesting is for people with ongoing symptoms, we know that a lot of people, it's still a smaller proportion of all people who have COVID, but for people who have lingering symptoms, if the symptoms linger more than 7 weeks, then they're actually at higher risk of death than people at 7 weeks who don't. So for people who have lingering symptoms at 7 weeks, they should not schedule surgery while they have the symptoms. They should push the surgery out if possible until the symptoms resolve more than push it further than 7 weeks in the future. You can see that there's still this drop off, but the fact that there's still this elevated risk, unless it's really emergency or an urgent need for the surgery, it's something they should probably seek to delay. Here's the same data broken out by the type of surgery. So minor surgery, typically the death rates are small, but even here you still see a signal. With major surgery, you see also that the major difference at 7 weeks. So waiting for the 7 weeks. Elective surgery here, you can also see the 7-week drop off, and emergency surgery as well, where you'd expect much higher death rates, but at 7 weeks you see the drop off. So across the board, and one more time, just to reiterate, this is only looking at people who were infected with COVID-19, not for people who are vaccinated. The vaccine, so people who are vaccinated and were not previously infected, totally different issue. The rules don't apply here. This is for people who were infected or who become infected in the coming months.
Very interesting. Goodness, that really picture speaks 1,000 words, right? Those pictures definitely illustrate something pretty incredible there. Okay, so let's leave it there. Lots more to discuss. Thank you to everybody who has sent in questions this week and who has asked questions during our conversation. Please keep the questions coming. And we look forward to being together, same time, same place next Sunday. Hope everybody has a safe and happy week. Glenn, thank you as always for your preparedness, your 1,000+ slides. And thank you for everything.
Thanks a lot, Rebecca. Thanks, everyone. I think next week I'll try to focus more on questions because we've accumulated all these questions that are unanswered. So instead of saying what the world looks like in the US, I'll maybe touch on that and then just jump in and go question after question after question because there's so many great things out there.
Game on.
Great. So be prepared, everyone.
Thank
Come
you.
prepared with your notepads next week. All right. Have a great week, everyone. Bye-bye.